Good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
everybody. How are you this evening?
So
Thanks for
nice to
joining
see
us.
everyone. I'm seeing down in the comment section a lot of discussion about book club coming to an end with our
I
wrap up
know.
of the Indigo Girl. I
It's
I
rather
picked up my
sad.
book. I picked up my book, and I always bring it along in case I need to reference something. But I picked up my book, and I was like, "This is our last time together discussing Eliza."
I know, but I want to know so much more about her, Sarah. I mean, she's just an amazing woman, and
Yeah, well,
we'll talk
luckily,
about that.
luckily, we're going to talk about some follow-up literature that we can sort of learn more
Yeah,
about Eliza, because at this point, as we wrap up the book, she's still a very young woman, and she is basically just still beginning
and
her life and this journey as a
and has a lot to do yet.
yeah, she has a
Yeah.
lot to do yet, but let's jump into the discussions here at the beginning. Hi, friends. I know everybody who's jumping on. I feel like we need to say a big hi
Yeah.
this evening, and there's lots of people saying hello from all over the place: South Jersey, Pennsylvania,
Oh,
Virginia. Yeah, hi,
and our
everybody.
friends even out in California. So, good
Yeah,
evening, everybody.
yeah. Thank you so much, guys. So, as we get into the wrap up of the book, I feel like there's still this roller coaster of emotions that are being processed. They're coming back to
Yeah.
Wapu, and it's probably the longest journey ever, knowing that Ben is really gone, and
Yeah, it's hard to
things are getting back
believe.
to normal. But she's walking the plantation and sort of taking everything in, her time there, and all of the efforts that she's put into it. But she's with the realization that her brother George is finally coming from England.
Right?
Um,
To take
to
over
sort of
all that
take a
she has done.
to take over. And at this
Yeah.
point, it's probably to the point where they're just going to step away from South Carolina altogether. It's quite sad if you think about it.
And those last couple chapters, the reading about Sarah just coming into the room and
Yeah.
just throwing herself on the floor and saying, "It's all my fault. I am so sorry."
You
Yeah.
know, I was not sure where to take this, but I feel like Natasha Boyd did a really great job of sort of using some literary type wand waving by Sarah coming in and just sort of saying, "It's my fault. I am the one that took your greatest love away from you." And of course, from the surface, we're thinking about the worms she had under the bed, and the
Oh
curse that
yeah.
she was going to put on it, and that
Yeah.
most likely Sarah was coming to the realization that even if she did place a curse and it was successful, those words, "I curse the thing you love the most," Sarah may have believed that she was talking about the indigo because she was so obsessed with it, but not knowing Ben was the
It's the
thing
thing
she
she
loved
loved
the
the
most. She
most.
would have always chosen Ben over the indigo, and Sarah knows that she hurt a whole lot more in the process.
That's true.
And for
Yeah.
her belief system, be it voodoo or other sort of form of practice, um, she holds very strong vigil to these ideas and
That's
the
true.
power that they have. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. And I feel like it kind of mended their relationship a little bit because Eliza, she always had a soft spot for Sarah.
She did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah was sometimes a difficult personality, but
But Eliza
yeah,
related to that because in society, or her own society, she
yeah,
was kind of like the thorn.
yeah. Did you also love it when she's when you read along and go, "Well, I went upstairs and went into my bedroom, and there is Essie. She's down on her hands and knees, also cleaning out underneath the bed." She goes, "Is my entire staff under
On the
on the
floor this
floor this morning?" Yeah,
But I think that she loves that she can always turn to Essie, and she's such a good sounding board as to what's going on in the house.
well, thank goodness, because her mother
Hmm.
wasn't very supportive in what
No,
she was
her
doing. I
mom
think
was
Essie was,
everything but that.
yeah,
Hmm.
she'd always go to Essie. And,
Yeah. Now, as they're sort of assessing, closing things up, she kind of has some intimate conversations with Charles Pinckney, and he sort of pleads, like, do you really have to go to Antigua?
mm-hmm.
Can you not sort of continue this on? And sort of hints to the idea that, like, he's really going to miss her. If there's any reason to stay, that
Yeah,
he and his family will miss her very much.
that's right.
But she's like, "No, I did my thing. I don't even know if we've been successful, but this sort of small miracle
Yeah,
happens." And she looks out onto the plantation. She says, "The seeds have come back. They have sown themselves once again." It's back better than ever.
It's supposed to happen.
Yeah, it's supposed to happen. And of course, one of the most fruitful areas, the ones that are coming to flower first, are the ones that are closestly located to Ben's residence.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just so romantic and poetic, when you think about it.
Natasha did a wonderful job in rewriting history.
Like, of course, that's where it was coming in.
Yeah.
And just out of pure instinct, she's like, I might be leaving, but I can't leave not knowing that this wasn't successful. If this is truly ready to go and we can really try once again to make this work, let's just do it. And even if I'm leaving and I'm heading back to Antigua, I can give the gift of this knowledge to the colonists that are still here.
They're going to stay.
Right, because it's all for the betterment of the king and trying to create this place that is their new home and their new world.
And look what she did.
She
was successful.
Yeah. I loved sort of reading that description because remember, as we close this up and she has an opportunity to participate in the harvest, she's done that once before, but then it stopped. She never had time to really be a part of the beating process and the fermentation process.
But a number of her servants, they were watching the entire thing.
Sure.
They knew now how to do it.
Yeah. And who knows, we knew from the beginning that Sarah had some level of knowledge, but she never got a chance to actually be helpful. Because remember, way back at the beginning, she said, okay, I'll help you. I'll help you get this started. And then Cromwell came in and sort of took over the whole show.
That's true.
She was sort of forced to step aside. I think that for the storyline, though, that was important because she was there for the longevity of it, not just this quick little thing.
But as she leaves, I think Quash, Togo, so many of the other ones, they now have enough knowledge that they can do this.
That's absolutely right. So they go through this whole process, and I'm thinking about this. And of course, I'm always doing additional research. And one of the things that came up in my research was in South Carolina, there was a lot of farms besides Eliza Lucas, eventually that ended up growing indigo. And there are accounts of folks that during this period, it's sort of the equivalent of when you can smell the paper mill. They could smell the fermenting happening of these indigo because they were talking large scale productions at this point that, people would complain about the odor and how terrible it was. Yeah, which is just, of course, how things go. Anytime farming or big industry comes in, it'll affect those not involved.
So the people who ridiculed her are now taking...
Exactly right.
A huge amount of her.
Exactly. So as I'm doing additional research, I started thinking about the lime, and we brought this up a little bit. I showed you a couple of industries that use lime. However, you couldn't just call up or hop on a website to order your materials. But do you remember they started talking about oyster shells in the previous 50 pages we examined? Oyster shells were a big deal all through these coastal regions. And this is a blog that I found that Deb will include in your comments section. And they talk about the oyster shells and the importance that it was used for construction. And it says right here, lime cement produced from oyster shells. And these were used to construct many of the structures that are still standing today. And I thought that was really interesting to sort of consider because here is a resource that they have readily available to them and they're able to break it down, and that process is not just grinding them up, but they would burn them, and somehow during the burning process it then became lime.
Well, Sarah, this is really interesting because I can remember driving around just north of here in Cumberland County and you will find lime kilns. Because there's a lot of limestone in this area.
Like the Hershey area.
They would put them into these kilns and they would basically heat it up and break that down, and that's what they put on their fields.
How did they learn that?
It's just hundreds of years of experimentation.
How cool is that?
Yeah, the oyster shells. Use what you have.
Right, and so, they talk, and finally it's during this process that Quash comes to her and says, this is what really happens. I know Ben wouldn't ever tell you this, but Cromwell just dumped extra lime in there to purposefully set things off track. And of course, mom's involved because
she's thrilled. She's going back to Antigua.
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's all sort of interconnected and gets all sort of messy. Now, there is a lot of follow-up literature that I really want to share with you folks. And I have a spotlight of a book I'd like to show you that is called Red, White, Black, Make Blue. And the author goes into a lot of history of just the same subject matter that we've been discussing. If you guys are looking for additional reads, I encourage you to read this blog post where they're interviewing the author and some of the facts behind writing the book. Really, really good read. So Red, White, and Black Make Blue. And of course, we will be putting this in the comment section. Now, I have to tell you, as they're discussing this process and they finally get some indigo made up into cakes, Eliza is thrilled, right? And she's like, I know, like, I am just on the edge of hopping on a boat myself and getting out of here. But she decides to say, for South Carolina, I am going to send these cakes off to England and have them tested in some of the dye houses to see how they might compare to the French indigo that Britain is basically forced to buy from. They're really only their resources.
And what a surprise.
What a surprise. Now, I was able to find some interesting images. These are two examples of what a cake might look like. Remember, they keep describing drying them out, these cakes to be sent off. Well,
they're really quite beautiful.
They are beautiful. The one on the left was made in London, and so this could have actually been colonial produced, but they would have had blocks made so that it was a British product. Because again, you're talking about everything in the colonies at this point still belonged to England. Right. But for the packaging and the distribution, it would have been done overseas. Now, the one on the right-hand side is from India. And I included this one as well because it's more cube-shaped, but not too far in the future. When colonial rule is in India, they started obtaining a lot more of their indigo from India just because, again, there was a built-in workforce and it was ideal climate for growing it. And they've been doing it for generations, right? So that is what a true cake would look like.
And I'm wondering, do they just grate that? How much does that cake
it's based on weight per pound, of course. We know that there are specific dye formulas that will get you to that end result when it comes to using. Now, it's been a long time since we found indigo that well. Now we get it sort of in a cake form or a powder, not cake like that, but it might come in larger chunks. But very rarely is anybody buying a several pound chunk of indigo. Now, if you are interested in doing some research and dyeing in this way, I do have a link that Deb will put in your comment section for you, where you can buy Japanese produced indigo cakes, and it's very sweet. The packaging, when it comes to you, comes in this sweet little box.
Look at that.
I know, isn't that so adorable? And I'm not sure the resolution will allow you to see, but there is this beautiful little flower pressed down into the center of the cake. So if you are a hand dyer or you're curious about possibly getting into indigo dyeing, this might be a really nice resource to see it in maybe a more pure form of how they might have experienced during colonial times.
Makes me want to try that.
I know. Well, Christmas is always coming. Now, I don't know. These are sort of things that I enjoy researching and getting them out in your hands. If you have an opportunity to purchase them and try them out, or you have, please put it in our comments section to let us know how it worked for you. I'm very curious at this point. Yeah. Now, I have to ask you, when you have learned to dye with indigo, have you ever heard anyone say that the indigo actually makes the fiber stronger?
No, I haven't.
No.
As a matter of fact, they talk about lime and lye, and I had a recipe one time that came from a well-known dyer, Palmy Weigel, who wrote a book on natural dyeing, and she suggested using, to break it down, Red Devil lye, which is like for clean draining and things like that. And Sarah actually, a little bit like Cromwell, used too much, and I took the skeins, and yes, they were blue, but as I stretched them like this, they just kept growing and growing, and it took the wool fiber and actually made it almost elastic.
What
That
was the product called?
Red Devil Lye.
Red Devil Lye.
Yeah, so
Okay.
like Drano
Yeah.
for you. So I just used too much. So it is caustic. You should be very careful when you're doing that. But make it stronger?
Yeah, that
I've
seems.
never heard of that.
Yeah, that seems like odd. I have to look that up for folks.
Mhm.
But one thing I do have to sort of talk to you about, and I think this is going to take some additional research, folks. But I found an article today that actually, and let me make this a little bit bigger for you all to read. But there was a woman being interviewed who wrote a book on indigo, and one of the things she was claiming is that indigo actually strengthens yarn. So, what it's saying here from this excerpt is that it does strengthen it because the indigo actually goes on in layers and does not penetrate into the fiber like those that use a mordant. Remember, indigo doesn't require a mordant. Um, if you look through a microscope, there's a white core in the middle of the indigo dyed fibers. With some archaeological textile finds, everything will have rotted except the blue dye fibers. And an example that she gives here are Persian carpets where the black is completely disintegrated, has disappeared. The reds are sort of worn down, but the wool that is blue or is silk is still very lustrous and intact. So that's interesting. I've never heard anybody else make claim to that. But I think, of course, you have to sort of examine, like, how long are
Yeah.
you keeping those fibers around to really test that out? But antique Turkish carpets, it would be a great example because there are lots of wear and tear.
Well, now, doesn't that really actually make sense,
Mhm.
folks? Because I see that Brenda Kuiper is
Mhm.
joining us. And Brenda, how many times have you taken Larry's jeans and cut them up into thin strips and woven rag rugs out of it?
Yeah.
And when you look at jeans, whether it's Larry, my jeans, whatever, whoever's jeans, usually if you look at, let's say, the knees,
Yeah.
and the seat of the pants, wherever it's going to get a lot of wear,
It just rubs
it's
it
white.
off. Yeah.
So it's really just sort of rubbing that blue off.
Uh-huh.
Sarah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too. But
Oh, interesting.
again, if any of you are indigo dyers at home, I think that we should talk more about this because it's really interesting to see how that chemically is actually happening.
I think I need to find some thread, cut it, and then look at it like straight on.
Yeah,
that
you
has
know
a
what?
white
We
cord.
have some up on the wall. We should actually cut some a little bit later and see how it goes. Now, just as a follow up here, she says lots and lots.
Yeah.
So somebody also made comment here, Dad, that red devil lye is also used in soap making, which
Of
makes
course it
sense.
is.
We think of lye,
Yeah,
but
thank you.
in why it would make yarn stretches a little bit
Mhm.
beyond me. All right, let's see. Jan says, if you read Jim Lyle's book on natural dyeing, he gives an alkaline vats for cotton and linen and more neutral pH vats for wool and silk.
That's true, Jen.
That's absolutely true. Yep. So let's talk about indigo a little bit more because we haven't yet talked enough about it.
No.
But here's an article I found through the South Carolina Encyclopedia, and they actually talk about the history of indigo from 1747 to 1802. And that's really the big time period where it was most popular.
And her time period
Oh,
for
right.
the book.
Right, exactly. Now, this is when most commercial cultivation would have been done, and it was only second to rice in export. Now, here are some really great figures in the third paragraph where they actually give us numbers as to how much was produced. 1747, 138,000 pounds of dye worth about 16,000, almost 17,000 pounds. Now, if we fast forward ahead, only about less than 30 years, they're now making more than 1.1 million pounds, valued at almost 250,000 pounds. So huge difference and booming crop.
This is the middle of the 18th century. I mean, if you could compare those numbers to today's prices.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was what I was sort of searching for a long time. But remember, it's hard to find that sort of information because remember, here in the United States, well, here in pre-colonial America, we had a really jacked up monetary system. So
Mm-hmm.
I was not finding any figures that would be relatable. But because this was going over to England and being processed and
Yeah.
sold based on the English pound, this was a much more helpful article to find out what the value at market would have been.
That's a lot of indigo.
It is a lot of
I just can't
indigo.
imagine.
Yeah. Now, I did find some small information, but I might reach out to some of our historical reenactors
Mhm.
that some of our Revolutionary soldiers actually took indigo on to dye some of the uniforms as well. You know, in contrast to the red coats, we had some indigo dyed
Like
Revolutionary soldiers. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure that there's a lot of history for those folks who are into military type reenactment
Mm-hmm.
that might be able to give us some more information on that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Now, were you sort of interested as the book wraps up? Eliza's getting ready to leave. Of course, Mrs. Pinckney
Mhm.
has sort of called on her the last time,
Very
and
sad.
it's very sad. This is a very close friend of hers, somebody that she really admires, somebody who really has just accepted her for who she is, and she's having to say goodbye. But how awkward that Mrs. Pinckney decides that this would be the most appropriate time on her deathbed to say, I've been reading all your letters, like that you write to my niece. I know how close you are to my husband. And, I was just thinking, when I die, it's going to be up to you to convince him to marry you.
Yes.
And I'm just kind of holding my breath this whole time.
And she tells this young woman, I know you can make him happy, you know?
You're the only thing that can make him
happy.
happy. And he'll never move on without you sort of being the one to prompt this. And can you imagine how intimidating that would be for someone who has never even courted someone,
Yeah, it's
let
tough.
alone be asked by a dear friend to say, I need you to court my husband and tell him that we should get married.
Yeah. A little
Oh my
awkward.
goodness.
A little
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah. So I agree, Karen. She's putting here, I didn't want the book to end. I didn't
No.
either. I look at it this way, that we're just looking at the end of a short period of her life, and there's much more to research beyond it. Yeah.
And so we do.
So we do.
Yeah.
Now, I was sort of curious, as the story progresses along and she and Charles finally have an opportunity once his wife has passed. Um, she sort of says, it would be wonderful if this would be something that I could stay here and
Mhm.
continue doing alongside you. And I think that it's something that we just kept seeing building and building and building. But that moment when it actually happens is so wonderful because it couldn't be a better situation, right? Her whole fear of being tied to somebody
Well,
other than him.
To.
Yeah. Yeah. The one person who will truly allow her to be herself rather than you're going to be my wife now and you're going to act like a normal woman.
Did anybody else think it's a little sort of creepy, though? I mean, he is 45 years. I just had to find this out. I looked at Wikipedia. Yeah, how much older was he actually than she was? And I guess she's 22 and he is 45 years old.
At their wedding.
At their wedding. I mean, that's considerably older.
Yeah, especially during that time period because nowadays, women are still having babies at 44.
That's true.
But not back then. They may have, but it was probably their 8th or 9th or 10th child. But for her, you and I talked about this a little earlier today. Who was going to be her intellectual equal that was her age?
She didn't
really.
have
There was very few people that she actually connected with in that way.
Yeah.
And so she was his intellectual equal.
She was just uncomfortable getting together with a parlor full of other young women doing needlepoint and giggling.
I know. Can you imagine?
I think she would have just been bored to tears.
Oh, yeah. I think her mind would constantly be working and trying to figure out.
It is a perfect match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, we don't actually go into their life beyond that, but what I do have to show you is a whole bunch of interesting information about the Pinckney family and sort of where their lives went post this book. And one of the things is they went on to have some kids, and Eliza ended up having 4 children in 5 years. My inclination is that the first son, He ends up going on being very successful. He ends up becoming a major. Um, the second son, however, unfortunately, he only lived 14 days, 15 days. He was a baby. Harriet went on, and she had a very successful marriage, and another son, Thomas, most likely named for her brother. Um,
That's true.
it is it is, yeah. And then I was also able to find the Pinckney family tree, which I'll include for you for those of you who really like history.
Oh, look at you.
So here's Eliza Lucas, and you can see Elizabeth Lamb. That would have been his first wife. And here are all their children. Now, this is where their lineage ends. Unfortunately, their daughter Harriet was the only one to produce an offspring. So she had one grandchild. So, I mean, their lineage did not go on and on and on.
No.
But if you follow this back, Charles Pinckney actually has quite the impressive lineage. If you look at all of the other members of their family, they're very, very accomplished individuals.
Sarah, what I'd like to know is, and I'm going back to the very beginning of the book.
Yeah.
You did some research, and do you remember, folks, this young lady and her husband go to Philadelphia and find her gravesite in Philadelphia.
Yes.
So what brought that on? Like,
So,
why is she in Philadelphia?
yeah, so I did some additional research because it was sort of strange. Like, why is she in Philadelphia since everything you hear about her is really her time either in England or in South Carolina. There is a small chapter after they're married where Charles actually takes a position, something to do with law in England. And so they moved their entire family there, and I think their children did some schooling there. And then they came back to South Carolina ultimately.
I see.
But what took her to Philadelphia was that in her later life, she was 70 when she passed away. She developed breast cancer, and she traveled to Philadelphia because at the time there was a doctor that was doing some more experimental treatments for cancer, but unfortunately she died only 3 weeks after arriving. It was not successful. So she was interned at the cemetery that we visited in our very first broadcast.
I am so glad you planned.
Yeah, and you know what? It's springtime, so it's a beautiful part of the city. I don't know if Deb can go back and find the link quickly, but the cemetery is located right in the heart of Philadelphia, so you could go and see the Liberty Bell as well as some other major attractions in walking distance to the cemetery where she is at.
Some things are probably still closed from COVID, but
Yeah.
like the church.
Not the church or the cemetery.
But the cemetery, you could go visit. It's springtime.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to make sure is that you all had a chance to continue on, because I can't say this enough. Like, her story has not ended, and she goes on to contribute a lot more to colonial America. So these are some additional readings. Your wife, Bink, she actually purchased this book and said it was a very good read.
She loved it.
It's getting 4 stars on Amazon. And again, these are all going to come flying at you in the chat section. So if you're interested in looking them up, you'll have quick links to go and check them out. This is another one, and it's just about Eliza herself. Okay, there's another one. And this one has gotten some really fantastic reviews. This is actually put together by, I believe, her granddaughter. Hold on, let's go back to the family tree. No, this would have actually been assembled by her granddaughter, I believe. Oh, I'll have to go back and look for you. But it gets very, very good reviews, and it's not that expensive. Now, one of the other things that we talked about a lot that I think you should go and continue researching are some of her letters. In this Wikipedia entry, it goes on to talk about that she was diligent about carefully copying all of her conversations and letters in a letter book. And I had been questioning that, like, how did they get copies of all these letters that she sent to people all over the place? No, she wrote them letters, and then she rewrote them and kept a copy for herself.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I kept reading this. I'm thinking, is she literally
Yes, she is.
writing word for word the same thing over and over again?
Yes. So they are broken down into 3 volumes based on where she's at. So the first section is when she's at the plantation. Then the second section is her life with Charles with their children. And then when they moved to London for his job, there it is. He was the commissioner of the South Carolina colony after that. And then the third volume is, the rest of her life up to 1762. So if you're interested in reading the letters, you can find on Amazon this book, The Letter Book of Eliza Lucas Pinckney, and you can sort of read more in detail. And she writes beautifully. We were lucky enough to have Bink pick us up a copy of that one as well. And just flipping through and listening to her wording and how carefully she chooses, especially when writing her father or Charles, I think is really well written. Let's see. What else do I have for you guys here? Ah, I know.
The dress.
The dress.
For all you readers, get this.
Let's talk about this dress. You ready for this? Look at this handsome number right here. This beautiful silk dress is an example of Eliza jumping on the bandwagon that became very popular in the late 1700s, early 1800s, which was sericulture. This is something we talked about in the Golden Thread.
Mm-hmm.
Sericulture was very popular, and so Eliza herself decided she would raise silkworms on one of their plantations. And this dress is the effect of the worms that she raised. She had it spun up, so she went to a mill, and under her advisement, it was spun up. And that fiber was sent to a mill in England, where it was woven into this brocaded fabric. This is actually on exhibit at the Smithsonian, and the details are so beautiful. Look at that!
Wow.
Yeah, wow. I think that this is just another fantastic example of her seeing through the entire process. This was not just a little whim. In order to produce, and Jan, I'm calling on you because I know you're listening out there. Mm-hmm. Please correct me if I'm wrong with my numbers. But at some point, I had heard that it takes about 100 silkworms to produce enough silk for a men's tie, and about 2,000 silkworms for a modern day wedding dress. Jan, hit us up in the comments section if I'm wrong with those numbers. So to produce a dress of this scale, she would have had to be raising hundreds to thousands of silkworms.
It's yards and yards and yards of fabric.
Yeah. There is a dress that eventually went on to be gifted to a noble in England. I don't know what her rank was, but I think it's just another fantastic example of her seeing it the whole way through.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, she's fantastic. What a whiz bang.
I am so glad you found that. That is just so cool.
Yeah,
so, not only Indigo, but she's raising silkworms too. She is an ambitious woman.
Yeah. Jan said she did see that gown in Williamsburg, and the fronts are completely embroidered in indigo silk.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So we can check further to see where that is on exhibit, if it belongs to the Smithsonian, or if it travels around. I'm not sure, but it's a beautiful example, and like how awesome to be close to the dress that she wore.
When museums open up again, let's go take a trip.
We should go take a trip. Yeah. Now, as we sort of bring things to a close with this book, we have to sort of talk about this because I don't want to go too far past our time for folks. But next week, in sort of honor of this whole process, we're going to be sowing some seeds to grow our own indigo.
Oh, good. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. I don't tell him anything before we come here. For those of you who purchased the book from Redstone Glen, this week we had Deb come in and help us pack up all the little thank you letters, and your indigo seeds are on their way to you right now. So by this time next week, you will have your seeds in hand. In fact, some folks in the Pennsylvania area, because they went out on Monday, may already have received them today. However, if you do not have seeds, no worries. If you want to join us next week, we're going to be going through the entire planting process. I can give you some resources as to where you can purchase indigo seeds from. But for our zone especially here, this is the perfect time to get them started, even though it's kind of rainy and cold. If you've ever been to our open house and you've purchased plants from Jean Frett, give us a thumbs up in the comment section. You'll remember that our open house typically falls
Yeah.
in June, which means those plants are already, 6, 8 inches high.
So this is perfect time.
This is kind of the perfect time.
Yeah.
Now, you don't need to have everything there. You can just sort of follow along with us, see what's involved before you commit to.
Oh, people are saying that
Yay!
they've arrived.
Yeah,
Good.
mine came today, says join. Anne got hers. Diane got hers today. So good. I'm
Good.
glad they're getting there to you folks. And for those of you out in California, Arizona, they're coming. They're
Yeah.
coming. So follow along with us. We're going to give you some tips and sort of talk about some tools you might want to have. But if
Do
you've
you
got
need a horse and plow?
well, not the scale that we're going to be working
okay.
on, but I'm going to suggest some stuff. However, you all are accomplished gardeners, I'm sure, in your own right. So there are going to be things that we suggest that you might have alternatives for. There will be time in the comments section if you want to say, hey, is it okay if I use toilet paper rolls to start my seeds in instead of
Oh, sure.
the tray that you're using? Yeah, sure. I'll try and include alternatives in our discussions as much as
Yeah.
possible. Okay?
But I don't think it's going to be too difficult, folks. I mean, even and inexpensive, just those little trays and.
Yeah, exactly right. And we're not going to try and make too much of a mess. Maybe we'll just scooch back a little bit on the tile so we don't get dirt all over the carpet. Unfortunately, it's too late in the evening to be doing this demonstration outside on our potting table. But
we can do it.
we can do it. And I am so in the mood. The timing is just perfect. 2 days ago, our forsythia opened. We've got hundreds of daffodil bulbs blooming all over the property.
It is so beautiful, and it won't be long for all of you who like to do a little hiking through Sarah's woods. We're going to have bluebells all through the woods.
There's little nubs coming up. The bluebells are going to be ready any minute.
And your girls are enjoying them. I'm finding dried up daffodils under looms and things like that. They're picking up bouquets of flowers and leaving them throughout the house. You are a lucky mom.
I am.
Yeah.
Now, we have some sort of sad news as we close up today, and I feel like it's so appropriate to sort of feel a little blue today. It was very rainy outside, but last evening, Dad has said goodbye to his little dog, Star. For anybody who had been to the studio and seen her, you know that she was a very lovable little dog, and she lived a total of
19
years.
That's
so
amazing.
She had blessed your family for a very long time, and we're very sad to be without her. But new chapters begin all the time, and it is spring, so it's time for new beginnings.
Start all over.
All over again. Yes. Oh, thank you, Mary. She said sorry for your loss. I look forward to seeing you all again next week. We're going to have a lot of fun getting our hands in the dirt and hopefully sowing the seeds for something fruitful for us here, maybe in the fall, to put our first indigo batch in the pot.
Hey, you know what else I have to share with you guys?
Oh, stay tuned. We got one more thing.
I got my second shot today, Moderna. Yay!
Yay! So things are chugging along.
They're coming along. So,
Thank you guys so much. We so enjoy our time with you. If you have any additional comments or questions, please list them in our comment section that we can get back to you.
Think about new books that we want to do.
Yeah, this is just such a total joy for us. And every week when we have a chance to get together, we love it more and more. So, all right. We will see you guys soon, and we will carry on with the seed growing.
Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Bye-bye.